All right. Ready to roll, sir?
Sure, let's get it.
What's going on, everybody? This is Mark Bruce and young Zane Scott. Zane is a good friend of mine. I'd like to welcome him to this show. This is the first episode, trying it out. Tips for Athletes is what the show is called, and we're going to help athletes just get to the next level. Zane Scott is an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Florida, where he is hands-on with the men's basketball team. And what was the norm is no longer, and he is masked up, gloved up, helping his guys get to the next level. So, Zane, what's happening, man?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on. Glad I'm the first one.
No doubt. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things go. This is either going to make or break it.
Oh gosh, that's a lot of pressure.
So I know you very well, but those who are watching and will be watching, they probably don't. So why don't you introduce yourself? Where are you coming from? What do you do? Where you've been?
Yep. So obviously Zane Scott, like he said, so I graduated 2016 from Ithaca College. Seems like a long time ago, but in the grand scheme of things, not really. So relatively young strength coach in the field. Right after I graduated, I worked at PCX Sports Performance, which is out in Webster. Mark and I linked up there probably 6 months into my first year there while I was finishing my master's degree. So did that for a while, moved away to finish my master's to Utah. From there, didn't coach in Utah, but went to a Division II school in North Carolina. So that would have been 2018, fall 2018. From there, so it's Wingate University, like I said, small Division II school outside of Charlotte. From there, made a couple good friends in the strength and conditioning field, asked around how I could kind of get to a bigger level, and actually straight from there, I came to the University of Florida. I was only here about 5 months, worked with men's basketball, was a head strength coach for men's golf. And then I was shipped off to University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Mass. So another move, basically head coach, had Florida ties. So really, really good connection there. Went there for a season. And then after this past year, I loved it so much in Florida and missed it a lot. Made a couple phone calls, called my old boss here, and, I was lucky enough for him to bring me back on as an assistant. But I'll be working men's basketball only. Like I said before, it was with men's golf as well, but men's basketball only, really my only focus. So that's the route I'm taking for now.
All right. Much better intro than I gave you. So Zane's been around the block, and he's got experience without a doubt. Zane's a good friend and a colleague, and he's definitely a go-to person for me when I'm looking to enhance my own personal movement ability, but also my athletes. So Zane, first question, what got you started in strength and conditioning? Why was this the path you wanted to take?
Yeah, so initially when I went to Ithaca College, I enrolled as an athletic training major. It's something I kind of fell in love with when I was in high school. I had a really major injury, and just like watching how my AT handled it and kind of how he shaped my life. Wanted to do something related to athletics. I was a college athlete as well. I was interested in that sports med kind of track, maybe go do, physical therapy school when I was done with AT, all that stuff. When I was a sophomore in college, I had befriended a guy who just loved strength and conditioning, was super into it, like just meatball of a guy. And he owns a sports performance facility now in Philadelphia, and we ended up being roommates. But basically, he was like, man, like, I don't know how you do it. Why would you just want to sit around on the sideline and wait for something to happen when you could be on the front end and hopefully prevent something from happening? And that's kind of how I looked at it. And with a little pressure from him, and then just actually getting a college strength coach as an athlete and really picking their brain and just like talking through the process, I kind of really fell in love with the idea of being on the front end of the puzzle when it comes to an athlete and taking care of an athlete. Rather, like he said, than wait around for something to happen, right? It's almost like you're cheering for an injury so you can do your job. And that kind of just as a young, like 19-year-old dude, that made sense then. Now I love my ATs and I love what they do. And I'm jealous of them sometimes just because, they actually see the sun, where I'm like in a dungeon in here. But Just like I said, really fell in love with it, fell in love with training, and just trying to quote unquote, better myself. Not to be too corny, but like it was just awesome to be in the process oriented or become a process oriented person rather than a goal oriented person. I was always really goal oriented, and to break it down step by step kind of became fascinating because of the challenge to me. And then so in college, you go through. I was a clinical exercise science major after I switched from AT. I went and did an internship with Cornell University, worked with 23 teams, and again, it just really bolstered my love for what I do now.
Nice, man. So this obviously this show is going to be to help athletes get to the next level, but also that's going to stem from getting, helping them in the college process. And for those of you that may not know what an AT is, and it's an athletic trainer. Zane is a strength coach. So Zane, what is your role as a strength coach? You said like you didn't want to wait for an injury to happen, and you do call yourself a strength and conditioning coach. What is your role to your athletes as a strength coach?
Yeah, I think it depends on what university you're at, or even if you're in a private setting, it just changes where you're at. But for me, as a strength and conditioning coach in my field and what I do and kind of my realm, it's almost everything that relates to the physical and mental stress of an athlete. Just having a small hand in everything, right? I wear a lot of hats, but first and foremost, with strength and conditioning, that's the obvious portion of my job. Most people would say, oh, it's the weights coach, but that's part of what I do is weights. Obviously I'm in the weight room majority of my day, but obviously doing conditioning as well for the team, out there in either same session, separate session, so on and so forth, just preparing them to physically be ready for the season is what I do from a physiological standpoint. But as well, once we get into the season, it's looking at all the stressors in their lives and kind of how we can manipulate schedules and so on and so forth, and meals, so they can perform at an optimal level. So strength and conditioning coach is my current title. Previous title, I've had sports performance coach. Some people call it athletic performance, so on and so forth. But just looking at the performance of an athlete and breaking it down into parts. The more resources you have and the bigger university that you're at, you become more funneled into your actual title. So like here, it's basically strength and conditioning. It's very in your face. When I was at smaller universities with less resources, you kind of play a hand in everything, when it comes to nutrition and supplementation. And we do that here too. But we do have nutritionists that, some things will kind of push towards them. I'm in a unique situation with basketball that it's such a small team that we have a big hand in nutrition, but most people at this level kind of hand it off to the nutritionist because they have such a big team. But yeah, I think I covered it. I think that's all I do.
I think that's huge because so many people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, undervalue almost what we do because it's thought that we just mess around with dumbbells and barbells and things like that. But, it's a multi-level facet. It's you're a jack of all trades, and, you said it great. You handle the physical, the mental, and I know it's the emotional piece too. So you truly are more than, you are a strength coach, but strength is looked at in different ways. So, moving on with that, what do you look specifically when you get an athlete walking into your gym? What do you want them to be able to possess as a freshman who's at your level? You're at a high level Division I school. What does that athlete need to be successful? If they're going to step on the court and compete.
Yeah, so from a just a court sense, I would say that skill sets the floor, and then attitude kind of sets their ceiling. So their ability to kind of become egoless, especially in the weight room, will take them a really far way. Because obviously, everybody I work with at this level is so skilled in the sport of basketball. But what sets them apart? I mean, there's going to be anomalies where guys walk in and they could roll out of bed and they'll drop 30 and they'll stay healthy and so on and so forth because genetically they're so gifted. But to keep them on the court, they need to be egoless, and they just need to kind of accept that they're not going to be great in the weight room. They don't necessarily have to be super raw. They don't have to be like in your face, like, oh my God, I love this. But, I always say that if they walk in the door and they're having a bad day and they walk out and they're having a better day, that's just going to set them up for success. That's something that I look for personally. Like I said, they don't have to love it. They don't have to love every second. Most of training sucks. We know that. Like there's more bad days than good days, but how you kind of handle those bad days. Again, it doesn't have to be like fake yourself through it and oh my God, this is the best, and you just got to try harder and all those corny mottos that we see everywhere. You just kind of have to do it. You just have to accept that you have to be a pro off the floor to be a complete player and be a pro on the floor, to have longevity. The kids that don't have longevity are typically a mess off the floor. They don't handle nutrition. They stay up too late. They're worried about the wrong things. Academics, they don't handle until last minute and they're super stressed out. And that all affects on the floor stuff. If it doesn't at first when you're an 18-year-old kid, it definitely will when you're 20, 21, 22, and all that accumulates over time. So be really good time managers, have an open mind. Like I said, egoless is something that I really look for, especially in the weight room. I want them to almost develop an ego as they get older, in terms of not like the weight on the bar, but like, oh, I can kill this today. Like I'm gonna kill it because I've done it before. And, I think if you just come in with an open slate and you want to build on top of it, you'll be successful.
Sure. I think you said you touched on a couple great points, that ego piece. So I want to bring that back because you're going to meet a kid who is one of the best athletes coming out of their high school and has potential to be a pro player, a pro baller, whether it's in the
Right.
NBA, G League, or even overseas. So for that senior who's at that level, what does an ego mean? What does that mean for that person so they can, like you said, be ego-less when they walk into that environment?
Yeah, I think, it's really easy to get caught up in it, especially when you're 17, 18-year-old kid at any level and anything that you do to say, if someone says, oh, you're great, you're the best, blah, 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 it's going to go to your head ultimately. And I understand that. And you have to have some sort of an ego to be elite at anything, in my opinion, because you have to take certain things personally and you have to want it for yourself and so on and so forth. But I think in the realms that you are not good at, you have to accept that you aren't good at them and you can only get better. I think if you are comparing, oh, I'm so and so, right? If you're saying that statement, I've heard before, oh, I'm so and so, you don't know who I am, whatever. I don't have to do this. You'll hear that, and all it's going to do is it's going to hurt you because everybody that walks in the door is that guy in high school. Every single person. So if you are all the same skill level and this kid's got a great attitude and you have a bad one and you play the same position, he's going to just surpass you and they're going to forget about you. They're not even going to know your name and they'll recruit over you next year. So I think it's a very humbling experience, and the really, really good kids get that and they don't take it for granted. So as a high school senior, I think knowing that when you go to school next year, that there's 5 more of you coming in, you're just a number to them at the end of the day if you don't handle your business. But if you handle your business, they're going to love you. They're going to take care of you. No question. There's a lot of schools, and more so than ever, there's a lot of transfers. So I think that it should be eye-opening going into a school, understanding that you really just need to handle your stuff and, like I said, be ego-less, and coaches will appreciate that for sure.
So from the standpoint of you touched on a 17-year-old who is the man in high school, probably Mr. Whatever in their state, and they're getting a ride to a big school. What about the ninth grader? How does the ninth grader take that pride and that ego? Like you said, you got to have it. Like you got to be, there's a fine line between cocky and confidence, and in order to be an elite, you got to have that confidence to the point where you come off as cocky. But what about to the ninth grader who thinks I'm 6'8", or I'm 6'4", I'm bigger than the most, I'm bigger than the rest, I already can do a lot, in the air with the ball. What do you say to them from the strength and conditioning standpoint? What's going to get them to that 1%? Because that's what they're trying to be, the 1%.
Be patient. I think is a big piece of that. And like I said, you're not going to do flashy movements when you're 8th and ninth grade. You're going to do really simple things. You're going to set a really good foundation to get strong eventually. If you're 6'8", in ninth grade, there's going to be some awkwardness to it. Of course, you're going to dominate. You're like a foot and a half taller than everybody, right? So it's just like to have a grounded sense of self, and hopefully these kids, like, they have somebody around them that, kind of tells them that. Um, but understanding that it's not going to be pretty, and it doesn't have to be pretty, because ninth grade basketball doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's really important to build a good base and the ability to, have fundamental skills and hone in on those and get really, really good at the basic stuff. So in the future, you get really good at it. It's just like strength and conditioning, in the same realm that we have to focus on movements first and then get pretty and fancy and all this stuff and try and get really, really strong. But just understand it's a long time before it really matters. Um, to the level of, hey, I'm getting Division I offers. You have a couple years, and at that point, you just have to train, not train to compete. Your ninth grade AAU tournament is not going to matter when you're getting recruited, um, you know, by a big time university or small college, whatever it is, right? It's going to be your junior, senior year, on the AAU circuits and all that stuff is what we tend to go to now, it seems like. But just be patient. Ninth grade basketball isn't the end of the, end all be all. And, going home and getting better versus, hey, I dropped 42 against, ninth graders that are a foot shorter than me. As much as it's fun and it's like, oh yeah, I dropped 42. It's more so about long-term development.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And you also said the fundamentals, and then you highlighted on train to train. For the young athlete who hopefully is watching this or will be watching this,
Yeah.
what do they need to train? What are the things they need in terms of exercises? What's let's say your top 5 exercise selection, and why do they need to master those movements so they can quote unquote get, fancy and get pretty?
Yeah. So, oh man, 5's actually a lot. I'm used to getting 1, but I
One,
would say a full range of motion squat of some sort that is appropriate for them. Completely full range of motion, because strength is gained in the range of motion is trained. So if you're ninth grade and you're squatting with an ego and you just want to put the most weight on the bar and you're going this far down, the rest of that movement is not going to get trained. And so when you get on the court and you get in an uncomfortable position, really, really getting low for, if a ball's on the floor, but you're not yet diving, super low in a squat stance, and you haven't trained that before, that's where an injury is going to happen. So full range of motion squat would be number 1 for me. It sets up really good success in the long term to put on muscle and all that stuff. But, again, put your ego aside, understand that you have to go through full ranges of motion in life. So the weight room is no different. I would say some sort of chin up or pull up variation. Normally neutral grip chin up is the best. It'll save your shoulder in the long term. It'll build the most relative strength to your body weight. It's one of the more impressive lifts. If you have a kid that weighs 150 pounds and they've got a 100-pound belt on, doing chin ups, that it's awesome. It's really, really good for shoulder health. Like I said, it'll keep them from having that rounded posture that we see all the time. As a ninth grader, a lot of kids just walk in, they just bent, they just walk in and put 135 on and see if they can do it and bench. It'll combat that and how that'll jack up your shoulders. So it's a really safe bet. Super young athletes, I would do some sort of carry, just pick up something heavy, dumbbell, whatever, trap bar like you do, and just walk with it. Really, really good for posture. Obviously just getting comfortable under load, and it just gives you more time with a bar. And then I would say, I don't even know how many that is, just sprinting efficiently is huge. Because, especially for basketball players, my guys don't really full sprint unless, they're running, because, after a drill they lost, right? It's not like full efficient, sprinting like 100 meters or something like that. Basically what that'll do, if you get really good at sprinting, your central nervous system will be able to handle more, and it will carry over to other things that aren't just sprint related. It's the highest output that you can have. So, and then the last one would be jumping, but in a controlled setting. So efficient jumping and landing. I wouldn't say those are in any particular order, but those would be my 5. I think that's 5. So squat, pull, carry, sprint, jump.
And so for those of you out there, you notice that, this is a collegiate level strength coach working with some of the, highest level basketball players. And he didn't say bench press. He didn't say overhead press. He didn't say bicep curls. So remember that, although that, looking good in a tank top is fun and your jersey is fun, what's the goal? What's the goal? To look better in your jersey while that can help mentally, or, you just want to be better on the court. So I think those are phenomenal. I think those are great movements. Debunk some myths for me. I want you to think of one of the worst myth that you've ever heard in terms of the weight room that you see athletes, you hear coaches or parents talk about, and I want you to debunk it.
Oh man.
You in your top 5 exercises, I can pick like at least 3 myths out of those, but I'll let you take the reins on this.
Well, I mean, I would say, that you need to be sports specific to be good on the court. I think that too often,
Sports specific, not to jump in. So like, what do you mean sports specific?
So quote unquote, look exactly like the sport. So in basketball, the Vertimax is the best example. So basically doing basketball movements, but with a banded something involved. Now you can do good things with a Vertimax, but the point is that it doesn't need to look exactly like basketball. You can do resisted jumps, that's fine. Of any sort, you can do resisted sprints on the Vertimax, that's fine. But adding a ball and you have your hands here and you're going up and getting a rebound and this and that, as fun as it is, it doesn't need to look like that for strength and conditioning to be successful. And it's probably actually deterring the athlete in some way and making them worse because it's slowing them down in a sport specific movement, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So the basics work, and they work for a reason. And a big reason is that the athlete is getting what they're not getting from athletics, right? In terms of basketball. So in basketball, you're jumping and running and cutting and this and that. And it's all high pace, high velocity, so on and so forth. So basketball, the highest velocities and the highest forces you'll see will be on deceleration. So slowing down, landing, cutting, so on and so forth. So in the weight room, it's really important that we go super basic and we actually slow them down and get them strong through, like I said earlier, ranges of motion that will mimic, in a way, sports specific to what they experience on the court. So they need to be able to slow down before they can go fast. So as a young athlete, if I were to have a 9th grader, let's say, like we said earlier, they're going to start slow. They're going to tempo everything. They're going to do ISO holds. And we talked about this at your gym, your athletes have seen it in the gym. Everything is slow, and it's almost, you have to earn, moving fast in the weight room. Just like, if you were to look at a progression for a basketball guy, once I have a pro guy, they might do things that are a little more quote unquote sports specific, but it's really just jumping, but jumping faster, right? It might be a trap bar jump, but it's all about speed. They've earned that because they can handle the deceleration and they can handle loads that are heavy and so on and so forth, right, throughout the whole progression. So it doesn't have to look like the sport for the kid to get better. It should actually probably be more general, is one. And then from the strength and conditioning side of things, I would put can only train one quality at a time. I think that people say that too much. And, again, they're looking just for, all right, well, in basketball, you're running up and down the court. So that's how all of our workouts need to look like. Like, no, it actually, again, should look like the other. So that's for both the parent side and the coach's side, to that question.
So long story short, it sounds like the myths are, I think your last point, hit the nail on the head. You play basketball, you play soccer, you play baseball. You almost should do opposite of what that kid is getting on the court. Let's face it, you and I, we deal with, very similar athletes, and getting on the court is not a problem. Playing basketball is not a problem. They'll find a court, they'll find a ball. so slowing down not only for joint health but like you said, to work on the actual mechanisms that they're using in the game is what's most necessary. And I'm sure there's going to be, I get this all the time with athletes. The minute you start talking about the mechanisms, eccentric, these are the top 5 exercises, they always ask, well, what should I do? So if you were going to describe very generally, because, you could take this in many different avenues, what would be a good session for an athlete? If they have 2 sessions a week, what would be a good session to get them to where they want to go? And I guess we'll just focus on the 9th grader and progressing, because then for any seniors out there, if you can't do what the 9th grader can do, then you should probably just do whatever, Zane has to say right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's dependent on the athlete, but if they're 2 times a week, it's probably going to be a full body lift. Just because of the minimal time they're spending in the weight room, you're right. You're probably looking at no more than 2 hours in a week, probably compared to about 10 to 15 on the court if there's no games and all that stuff. So full body, there's got to be some sort of squat, a upper body pull, an upper body push, a posterior chain dominant. So that's normally hamstring, glute, something related. And then what am I missing? Probably, like I said earlier, a carry, especially for a young athlete, would be great to add in there. A throw, and then some sort of jump or landing or something like that. That's just for a young athlete.
When would you
just pick
the session?
Jump at the beginning. Yeah, just to warm up your central nervous system. That is, you warm up and then you do your jump or your sprint or whatever. That's going to basically make your motor run, for lack of a better term, and then you would do your lift. Basically, you're looking at an hour session, like I said, and then just pulling from those categories most importantly, and then it obviously whatever coach they're working with, might progress each exercise. You might start at a goblet squat and end up at a back squat or however they do their progression. It just depends on the athlete, but just picking from those categories and, just running with it, getting the basics down. It's not, you have 2 days a week, you're doing all chest day and then all back and bicep day. You might, if you were training 4 days a week, you might break it down into upper, lower. If you're in the off season, you're really trying to put on muscle. But for 2 days a week, you need to train full body. You need to hit, every category on both days. And then there should be variation in those exercises in those 2 days, right? If I got just straight up goblet squat, Monday and I lift again on Thursday, I shouldn't goblet squat again. Maybe it's more of a single leg, or I'm learning the progression for front squat or so on and so forth. So again, picking from those categories and then deciphering what fits the need of that kid between those 2 days.
Okay. I like it, man. That's huge, because we always get that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. So I know you've seen it. You see a kid walk in and they're coming to work out with you and you ask, what'd you do yesterday? Well, yesterday was chest day, or it was back and buys day. Why do you think that's not the appropriate, microcycle? Why is that not the appropriate training plan for athletes? Doing the chest day, the back by, the squat, the leg day, the arm day, and then, your deadlift day or whatever it's going to look like.
Yeah, for a multitude of reasons. I think, number one is that if you do a chest day or just a leg day or whatever, every single person that does a split like that is sore as all heck the next day. Whatever body part they work, because basically that split is set up where you're only doing one body part per week. So you should be quote unquote blown out from that day. However, it's going to take away from your sports performance. So why would you want to do anything outside of the gym that will take away from your performance inside of the gym, especially if you're in season or you're close to it? Or, hey, I just played 4 AAU games this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. I had 2 and 2, and then I stayed up late and I did my homework, and then I did chest day, you're going to be sore for like 3 days, and it's really just going to mess up your week. So that's number one, is taking away from what they're supposed to be doing in sport. And number two, it just doesn't make sense for an athlete, because that's just a consistent breakdown, of musculature, and it doesn't mimic what they need to be doing as an athlete, right? In terms of having multiple planes of motion, multiple movements, right? It's not just this. Basketball is not just this. As much as there's chest passing, there's really not that much correlation, right? But there needs to be a lateral lunge to get in that plane of motion and open up the hip. And there needs to be a squat full range of motion, because they need to strengthen their knees in deep knee flexion, which is all the way down at the bottom and all the way up to the top, because that'll protect their knee. They need to do some sort of posterior chain movement, which again is like a hamstring or a glute for the people that don't know watching. And that's also going to protect their knees, but it's going to combat all the stress that they have at the knee from jumping and running and cutting and so forth. So it's really a longevity plan versus a, hey, let's just get big and look awesome plan. I think that's the most important thing that we can provide.
So I think that's another myth. You have to look big to be successful. Can you talk about that? Why isn't looking big necessarily going to translate to playing well, whether it's basketball, baseball, soccer?
Yeah. First of all, you have to be a movement-based athlete. You have to understand that movement trumps all, and force. Well, force and movement are interchangeable at the top of the mountain. Those are the two things that matter the most: are force and movement. If you look at a guy like Allen Iverson, right? Maybe 6 foot, 100 something, 80 pounds, never lifted. Like, was adamant.
Maybe generous.
Yeah. But not a big dude, and never lifted and was adamant about it. But he was such a skilled mover and produced so much force in his small frame, and was able to handle force in his small frame because he's just a scrappy dude, that he excelled in basketball. And I think that's a note, not to not lift, but to see what he did really well and how can I build that. So the biggest guys aren't always the most resilient. They're not always the most robust, and they don't always produce the most force or move the best to dominate in a game like basketball or any sport, right? Force is just a huge portion of what athletes do. And just because you're bigger doesn't mean you're producing more force, because you can be slow as all heck. So it's got to be a balance between size and speed.
Fair enough. I like it. So let's end this audience with this. What tips? What tips do you have for the up and coming athlete? Whether, let's give a tip to the 9th grader and a tip to the 18-year-old who's searching for a collegiate scholarship and or just trying to play college ball. What tips do you have for them?
As much as you work on your game, work on the intangibles. So the intangibles are things like attitude and effort, and consistency, and so on and so forth. I think that working on yourself off the court as a human being will translate on the court, no matter what it is. And understand that, basketball ends at some point, and not to make it sound dramatic or disheartening, but, at some point, my athletic career ended, and I stayed in athletics, and I would stay in athletics as a coach before I would go back and be an athlete, because I love what I do and I'm blessed to do what I do. And if you asked me that 6 years ago, I would have said the complete opposite answer. So understand that those things that you do off the court matter more than you do on the court or on the field. And they will directly affect those things. Be a pro off the court, off the field. So that's nutrition, sleep, time management, stress management, so on and so forth. So create a circle of people that you can trust, that can help you with those things. And then from a true basketball sense or as an athlete sense, don't be afraid to reach out to a coach first. I think that's something that people don't say enough. I get hundreds of emails a week from random kids, and I'm the strength coach, and they don't know any better. They don't know who to reach out to. Hey, I'm a 6'5" guard from blah, blah, blah. And, I might not do anything with it, but, I forward it all, to all the assistants and say, hey, take a look at this. So just to get your name in front of somebody, could go a long way. I'm not saying call them, all the time incessantly and be like, oh, recruit me. But, I think especially for a mid-tier player, always reach out. Even if it's to a D3 school, a D2 school, nobody's going to know who you are if you don't reach out unless you're a top 150 guy, or it's your local college that can recruit you. And just be patient. Do the things that you need to do on and off the court, and the right thing will happen in terms of your college athletics career, if you're going to continue on. But also, if it doesn't continue, that's okay. Be okay with that, and understand that college athletics is hard, and it's really hard to get into, and it's even harder to stay in. So, just be patient with those things, and it'll all work itself out.
Beautiful. I think the number one thing that stands out is be consistent, and that's huge. Don't drop off. If you're going to spend time in the weight room and tell yourself you're going to get bigger and stronger, be consistent every week, whether it's 4 days a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Whether you got to change based on the season, I think consistency is going to be big. And I think a lot of people undervalue the mental side of things, stress management, and making sure that you can handle the stressors that come your way, especially nowadays. Coaches are probably gonna, they're gonna be needed more than ever, because athletes at my level, where I got a lot of high school kids, we may not see the sport, we may not see the field of the court this year. And then kids your age, your kids, they're banking on an NBA contract, and if they don't get this year, they may not get that, and that's probably very intimidating too. So again, I reiterate that, definitely rely on your coaches for support. That's huge.
Love it.
So Zane, my friend, that is all today. I appreciate your time. We are going to sign off and call it a night.
All right, man. Appreciate you. Go Gators.
No doubt. Absolutely. Go Gators. Check them out. All right, Zane, we'll talk, buddy. Thank you.
All right, man. Yep.